قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, ولا جوهر, and he is not at all a jawhar. So the Shaykh's going to explain everything. Jawhar sometimes means the atom, which is the indivisible particle. And sometimes it means some entity, a physical entity. And maybe sometimes they could use it for other meanings too, like a gem or jewel. He is not at all a jawhar. So let's see, what does the Shaykh tell us it means here. SharH, the explanation. أنه يستحيل على الله تعالى أن يكون جوهرا, is that it is impossible for God, exalted is He, to be a jawhar. وهو في عرف المتكلمين من أهل السنة الجزء الذي لا يتجزأ, and it is, according to the norm of the theologians from the people of the prophetic way, the piece, it is the piece that does not split. It is the piece that does not fracture. Min al-qillah, due to its ultimate miniaturization. Ma'a tahayyuzih, but while confirming that it is still self-contained. It is still contained. It is still filling a space and existing in place, despite how miniature it is. وَيَكُونُ جُزْءًا لِلْجِسْمِ, and it would be a piece of a body. فَاللَّهُ تَعَالَى مُنَزَّهٌ عَنْ ذَلِكَ, and so Allah, exalted is He, is exalted, is cleared from that. أَمَّا الْفَلَاسِفَةِ, but concerning the philosophers, فَأَرَادُوا بِهِ مَاهِيَةَ الْمُمْكِنَاتِ, what they meant by jawhar is the essence of possibilities, the essence of the possible things, the reality of it, that is. وَهُوَ مِنْ جُمْلَةِ الْمُمْكِنَاتِ الْعَقْلِيَّةِ, and it is amongst the mental possibilities or intellectual possibilities. وَأَمَّا إِذَا أَرَادُوا بِالْجَوْهَرِ, now if what they meant by jawhar is الْقَائِمَ بِذَاتِهِ الْمَوْجُودَ لَا فِي مَوْضُوعٍ, if what they meant by jawhar is what is self-existent, something self-existent and existing without any whereabouts, existing without any particular spot. فَهَذَا الْمَعْنَى لَا يَسْتَحِيلُ عَلَى اللَّهِ, this meaning is not impossible for Allah. لكن امتناع إطلاقهما أي الجوهر والجسم على الله من جهة عدم ورود الشرع بذلك. So, let me just back up a little bit more here. So we want to say Allah is not a jawhar. And the Shaykh came out and he said jawhar means the unsplittable piece, the piece that cannot fracture due to its ultimate miniaturization. That's what it is according to the theologians of the people of the prophetic way. And according to the philosophers, they said that the jawhar is the essence of possibilities. What does that mean? The reality of possible things. What does that mean? Shaykh goes on, وَهُوَ مِنْ جُمْلَةِ الْمُمْكِنَاتِ الْعَقْلِيَّةِ, and this is something that's amongst intellectual possibilities. So you might say, this talk's not clear for me. So Shaykh goes on, وَأَمَّا إِذَا أَرَادُوا بِالْجَوْهَرِ, well, if by this talk what they mean, they're saying jawhar, and then they gave this definition they gave. So if what they meant by jawhar is who's self-existent and existent but without being in any particular spot, فهذا المعنى لا يستحيل على الله. This meaning is not impossible for God to be self-existent without being in any particular spot. So somebody might say, so we can call him Jawhar? No, we can't. Shaykh says, لكن امتناع إطلاقهما, or لكن امتناع. If you recite this with sukoon on the noon, then you're going to have to put a kasra actually to break two sukoons. And then you'd say, لكن امتناع. But if you read it with shadda, then you'd say, لكن امتناع إطلاقهما, أو لكن امتناع إطلاقهما على الجوهر والجسم. However, though, the prohibition, the prevention from using these two words, jawhar and jism, for God, is from the perspective of their not having come in the sacred law for God as words to refer to God. مع تبادر الفهم إلى المركب المتحيز. And not just that, that along with the fact that what comes to mind by these words is what is compound and what is contained. وأما المجسمة والنصارى. And as for the anthropomorphists, the bodifiers, and the Christians, فقد ذهبوا إلى إطلاق الجسم والجوهر عليه بالمعنى الذي يجب تنزيه الله عنه. As for the bodifiers and the Christians, they have gone to the position of using the word jism, body, and jawhar, for God, with a meaning that's necessary to clear God from. So what you need to understand here is Jawhar means something to the Sunni theologians. But this word Jawhar in Arabic, or what might be translated from another language into Arabic as Jawhar, is used by other groups not with the same meaning though. And they use that for God. They use this word for God. Now, might someone use this word for God, giving a meaning that applies to God truly, but they use this word? And might someone use this word for God without a meaning that befits God too? So, if by chance the philosophers meant something that works for God, yani that's usable when you're talking about God, then the meaning is fine, but the word doesn't work. So we reject the word Jawhar for God. And as for the bodifiers and the Christians, they use the word Jawhar for God with a meaning that doesn't befit him, as well as the word Jism. And doesn't mean that they're using it with the meaning of the atom that cannot be fractured, the unsplittable piece. So sometimes in some of the different chapters of knowledge, you need to watch out for that. A word that's being used with a meaning, it might even be like a first meaning for us, a fundamental meaning, might be the word in the heading, like here, wala jawhar, if this were a heading, wala jawhar, and not at all a jawhar, and then we define it, what we mean by it. But then the same word will come as you progress through the chapter, and it's not necessarily meaning that same meaning that we mean by it. If you don't realize that, you might not be clear about some things. فَإِنْ قِيلْ. And so if it were said, كيف جاز إطلاق الموجود والواجب والقديم والصانع والأزلي. وَنَحْوِ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ. How is it permissible to use mawjud, existent, and wajib, necessary, and qadim, eternal, and sani', maker, and azali, eternal, and the likes of these for God, mimma lam yarid bihi shar'u nassa? How can you use these words for God and there was nothing that came in the sacred law concerning them? There's no explicit documentation for them in the sacred law. قلنا, we respond, جاز إطلاق ذلك على الله بطريق الإجماع. The usage of that for Allah is permitted by way of the consensus. وَهُوَ دَلِيلٌ شَرْعِي, and consensus is a legal evidence. It is religiously a legal evidence. بَلْ قَالَ بَعْضُهُمْ, in fact, some say, إِذَا وَرَدَ الشَّرْعُ بِإِطْلَاقِ اسْمٍ بِلُغَةٍ فَهُوَ إِذْنٌ بِإِطْلَاقِ مَا يُرَادِفُهُ مِنْ تِلْكَ اللُّغَةِ. If the sacred law came with the usage of a name according to a language, then that is permission to use its synonym in that same language. أو من لغة أخرى, or in another language. وما يلازم معناه, and what is bound to or necessarily implied by its meaning would also be usable. So an example here, some said, if a wording did come in the sacred law for God, then this wording alone is permission to use the synonym of that wording in the same language. So that means Arabic. Or in another language. So that means Arabic translated to another language. Example we have here is Nahwu lafzi khuda fi lughati al-Farisiyya. Like this word, khuda, in Persian language, it means God. وَمَا يُلَازِمُ مَعْنَاهُ, or what is bound to its meaning. Also you could use what's bound to its meaning, nahwul mawjud, like mawjud, existent. وَهَذَا لَا يَصِحُّ عُمُومُهُ, but its generality, its generality is not valid. وَقَدْ اتَّفَقَ أَهْلُ السُّنَّةِ أَنَّهُ لَا يَجُوزُ إِطْلَاقُ لَفْظٍ غَيْرِ وَارِدٍ عَلَى اللَّهِ. The people of the prophetic way have agreed that it is not permissible to use a wording that did not come for God. إِذَا كَانَ يُوهِمُ مَا لَا يَلِيقُ بِذَاتِهِ. إِذَا كَانَ يُوهِمُ مَا لَا يَلِيقُ بِذَاتِهِ تَعَالَى. If this word gives the impression of what is not befitting for his being or his self. Exalted is he, karuh, like soul. So what did the Shaykh say right here is agreement. He says the people of the prophetic way agree that you can't use an expression that didn't come, and he didn't stop there. He didn't say you can't use an expression that didn't come for God, period. So the agreement continues. When this word gives the impression of something that doesn't befit God, like soul, so that's an agreement. وَأَجَازَ بَعْضُهُمْ وَهُوَ الْغَزَالِي إِطْلَاقَ الطَّاهِرِ عَلَى اللَّهِ. And some have permitted, and that's Al-Ghazali, using At-Tahir for God. Yani, the pure one. The pure one. لِوُرُودِ إِطْلَاقِ الْقُدُّوسِ عَلَيْهِ. He says, because the wording Al-Quddus came in the sacred law for God. Al-Quddus, which one might translate as the holy. And that means the one who's clear of imperfection. مَعَ خُلُوِّهِ عَنِ الْإِيهَامِ. And that's along with this word, At-Tahir, the pure one, being clear of any false impression. Yani, what bad meaning might someone get out of the pure one? Yani, Al-Tahir in Arabic, and in English, the pure one. I don't know how could someone take a wrong meaning out of there? A bad meaning out of there? But you know what people with waswas do? Is they look for a kufr meaning in something, even if it doesn't appear to them. They just hear something, and if there's something about it that could trigger them, that sense them, and they're so sensitive anyway, then they try to find something kufr in there. And if they don't find it, then they'll ask you, is there any way this could be kufr? And when someone asks you that, tell them, throw this question away. Don't look for the kufr. That's the whispers of the devil. فإنه أجاز إطلاق اللفظ الغير الوارد على الله. Indeed, Al-Ghazali has gone to the position of permitting using wording that did not come in the revelation for God. In kana wasfan, if it's an adjective, that's a condition according to him. If it's an adjective, so it's not another type of noun, like it's not a common noun. It's not a concrete noun. It's an adjective. That means a descriptive word. غَيْرَ مُوهِمٍ. And on top of that, this adjective has to be not misleading. غَيْرَ مُوهِمٍ لِمَا لَا يَلِيقُ بِاللَّهِ تَعَالَى. Not giving the impression of something that doesn't befit God. Exalted is He. واتفقوا على منع إطلاق اللفظ الموهم ما لا يليق عليه كلفظ السخي. And they have agreed to prevent using wording that gives the impression of something that does not befit him. Like the word as-sakhi. Only thing I have here in my notes is as-sakhi يوهم نقصا وإن كان بمعنى الكريم. Sakhi gives the impression of deficiency, even if it does have the meaning of generous. So I'm not sure what's that angle of deficiency, or what's that impression that someone could get from there. وَهَذَا فِيمَا كَانَ وَصْفًا. And this is concerning a word that's an adjective. لا فيما كان جامدا, not something underived, not a name that's underived. Now this issue is way clearer in Arabic because of how Arabic's patterns are very consistent. English, for example, has patterns but not so consistent. So, for example, if I say work, W-O-R-K, as a noun, work, so this is not derived. That's a source for something else. So then you say worker, that's someone who works, so that's derived. So, and that's an adjective. Worker, that's an adjective. In Arabic, the adjectives are derived. So for example, Tahir, according to Al-Ghazali, you can use it. That's an adjective, and it's derived. It's not frozen, underived. I'm going to say underived. Underived, they call it jamid. Jamid means frozen. What that means that it didn't come from a source prior. It's a source itself. So then what would be the source of this adjective? Tahara, purification, or tuhur, purification. So it wouldn't be valid to call Allah tahara or tuhur, purification, because this is underived. According to those who said you could use names for Allah that didn't come, it's a condition that these names would be derived because they have to be adjectives. Or you could say it in another way. It's a condition that these names would be adjectives because they're going to be derived. So you're not going to use an underived word. I gave you the example of work versus worker. And then he has examples too. He says, min asma'il a'yan, underived words that are names of things, common nouns. Karruh, like soul. So soul, that's not an adjective, that's a thing itself. Adjective means description of something. You don't say, a ruh is a one who such and such. No, a ruh is a such and such. It's not an adjective. So anything like that is denied by consensus. So you can't say Allah is a stone or tree or like that, soul or something like that. That's by agreement. What they didn't agree is if you could use an adjective for him if that adjective doesn't give a false impression. Like tahir. فَإِنَّهُ مَمْنُوعٌ بِالِاتِّفَاقِ. Using such underived words, names of things such as common nouns, is prohibited by agreement. فَإِطْلَاقُ سَيِّدْ قُطُبْ الرِّيشَةُ الْمُبْدِعَةِ or الرِّيشَةَ الْمُبْدِعَةِ. So for Sayyid Qutb to use the wording for God, the creating feather or creative feather. So it's like he wants to be poetic. And then he'll touch some fool who will like what he's saying and defend him too. وَالْقُوَّةَ الْخَالِقَةِ, and calling him the creating power. And some people use other words, like they say God is an intelligence. So Sayyid Sabiq using such expressions for God, ala Allahi ta'ala mamnu'un bil-ittifaq. It's prohibited by agreement. لأنه ليس وصفا, because it's not an adjective. فالريشة اسم من أسماء الأعيان. Feather is a common noun. وَالْقُوَّةُ صِفَةٌ, and power is an attribute. وَلَيْسَتْ لَفْظًا مِنْ أَلْفَاظِ الْوَصْفِ. It's not any type of descriptive name. It's not an adjective. وَلَيْسَتْ مِنْ قَبِيلِ الطَّاهِرِ, and it's not the type of word that a tahir is. لِأَنَّ الطَّاهِرَ اسْمُ فَاعِلٍ, because a tahir is the name of a doer. قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him. ولا مصور, nor is he at all depicted. SharH, the explanation is أن الله تبارك وتعالى يستحيل أن يكون مصورا, that Allah, exalted is He, it is impossible that He be depicted. أي ذا صورة وشكل, meaning something of an appearance and shape. مثل صورة الإنسان أو الفرس أو غيرهما, like the appearance of a man or that of a horse or something else. لأن ذلك من خواص الأجسام, because that is special to bodies. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. تحصل لها بواسطة الكميات والكيفيات وإحاطة الحدود والنهايات. This depiction happens by way of dimensions and modality and having edges and extents. قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, ولا محدود, nor at all is he limited. Why I keep saying at all? To emphasize the negation. Where did the emphasis come from? It came from here, when the author said, Laysa bi'arad, this bat, it intensifies the negation. Laysa is the negation, the negating word. So I could just say, not a property, but I'm trying to match or at least bring out the emphasis. Not at all a property, nor a body, nor at all a body. Now, if I kept them linked, then I wouldn't repeat. Nor at all, but because I'm breaking them apart, because it's broken apart to explain in between. That's why I'm repeating. Nor at all, to keep the emphasis. So he says, wala mahdud, and nor at all limited. SharH, the explanation is أن الله تعالى منزه عن أن يكون ذا حد ونهاية, that Allah, exalted is He, is cleared from being someone who has a limit and an edge. كسائر الأجسام, like all bodies have. لأنها محدودة, because all of the bodies are limited. فالعرش الذي هو أكبر الأجرام محدود. And so the arsh, the ceiling of paradise, which is the largest thing of volume, is limited. وكذا الذرة محدودة, and likewise the dust particle is limited. لأن الفرق بينهما من حيث كثرة الأجزاء وقلتها, because the difference between them is due to the plentitude of atoms, or the lack thereof, the small number of atoms. He says parts, and parts here means atoms. والذرة عند أهل اللغة والمتكلمين تطلق على النملة الصغيرة الحمراء. And dharra, that I translated as particle or dust particle, according to the people of the language and according to the theologians, is used to refer to the small red ant, which I could have translated it that way too. It has both meanings, and I was inclined to translate it that way, but then I said, go for the particle. So Shaykh clarified his intent here. قال الحافظ اللغوي مرتضى الزبيدي, the hadith headmaster and the linguist Murtada al-Zabidi said, الذر صغار النمل, dhar are small ants. مئة منها زنة حبة شعير, it takes 100 of them to weigh as much as a barley seed. وقيل الذرة ما ليس لها وزن, and it was said that a dharra is what is weightless. ويراد بها ما يرى في شعاع الشمس الداخل في النافذة, and what's meant by it is the way I translated it the first time. What is seen when the sun rays shine through the window? قالوا الذر النمل الأحمر الصغير قالوا الذر النمل الأحمر الصغير. They say the dhar is the small red ant. Al-Wahidatu dharrah, or small red ants. They say a dhar is small red ants. Al-Wahidatu dharrah, a single one is called dharrah. فَالْعَرْشُ أَجْزَاؤُهُ كَثِيرَةٌ. And so the arsh, it has many atoms. وَالذَّرَّةُ أَجْزَاؤُهَا قَلِيلَةٌ. And the small red ant, it has few atoms. فَلَا يَتَوَهَّمْ مُتَوَهِّمٌ غَافِلٌ عَنْ تَنْزِيهِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى أَنَّ مُرَادَهُمْ بِنَفْيِ الْمَحْدُودِيَّةِ عَنِ اللَّهِ أنه شيء لا تحصى أجزاؤه كالعرش. So let no delusional, let no delusional person who is heedless about God's exaltation be deluded to think that what they mean by negating limitation from God is that he is something unending, that he is something in space but unending, filling a space in all directions without ending, meaning that he has uncountable atoms or uncountable parts like the arsh. وَأَنَّهُ لَيْسَ شَيْئًا صَغِيرًا قَلِيلَ الْأَجْزَاءِ. Nor should he be deluded to think that God is something small with few atoms. بِحَيْثُ يَدْخُلُ تَحْتَ الْحَصْرِ, such that that's something that could be quantified by a creature. فَيَنْبَغِي الْإِهْتِمَامُ بِبَيَانِ هَذِهِ الْعِبَارَةِ لِطَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ عَلَى الْوَجْهِ الَّذِي ينفي عنهم توهم المعنى الفاسد المذكور. So it's a must. Paying attention to these expressions, or this expression, is a must for the student of knowledge. Paying attention to it in a way that negates, that makes them negate being deluded and having a the mentioned corrupted meaning. لأنه قد يتوهم بعض الجهال إذا قيل الله ليس له حد. Because some ignoramuses might be deluded if it were said Allah does not have a limit. أو ليس بمحدود أن معناه جرم كبير. They might be deluded to think this means he's very large, expanding in all directions. He's saying to some people, to say God is not limited might make them imagine that he goes in all directions unending. وَاعْتِقَادُ الْجِرْمِ فِي اللَّهِ كُفْرٌ. And believing that God has volume is blasphemy. فَمَنْ اعْتَقَدَهُ جِرْمًا صَغِيرًا أَوْ اعْتَقَدَهُ جِرْمًا كَبِيرًا كَالْعَرْشِ. So anyone who believed that God was a small volume, or he believed him to be a big volume, كالعرشي, like the arsh, أو أوسع منه, or even wider than the arsh, فهو جاهل بالله غير عارف بربه. Then he is ignorant about God and unknowing about his Lord. فالله تعالى منزه عن الحدود. And so Allah, exalted is He, is cleared from limits. A. لا يجوز عليه عقلا ولا شرعا أن يكون له حد. Meaning that it's not permissible for him intellectually nor religiously that he would have a limit. ولا يجوز أن يقال إن له حدا لا نعلمه. And it's not permissible that it be said that he has a limit that we do not know. بل هو يعلمها, and that rather he knows his own limit. كما قال بعض المجسمة من الحنابلة, like what some bodifiers who perpetrated as Hanbalis said, min aslaf ibn Taymiyyah, amongst the predecessors of Ibn Taymiyyah. وذلك لأن المحدود يحتاج إلى من حده, and that's because anyone limited needs the one who limited him. وَالْمُحْتَاجُ إِلَى غَيْرِهِ مُحْدَث, and anyone who needs another is created. وَالْمُحْدَثُ لَا يَكُونُ إِلَهًا, and anyone who's created would not be a god. لِأَنَّ الْإِلَهَ مِنْ شَرْطِهِ الْأَزَلِيَّةُ وَالْقِدَمِ, because the condition for God is eternality and beginninglessness. ويكفي لنفي الحد والحجم عن الله تعالى من حيث النص الشرعي قوله تعالى ليس كمثله شيء, and sufficient for negating limit and volume from God, exalted is he. From the perspective of religious text is his saying, exalted is he, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, unlike him is there anything whatsoever. 11th ayah of Surah Shura. لأنه لو كان حجما لكان له أمثال لا تحصى, because had he had a volume, then he would have uncountable similars. وهذا من الأوليات في مفهومات هذه الآية, and this is amongst the priorities that are understood from this verse. لأن الشيء ذكر في الآية في معرض النفي, because the something is mentioned in the verse in a negative context, a negating context. Yani, the anything, rather, according to the way I translated it. Unlike him, is there anything? The anything is mentioned in the verse in a negative or negating context. Yani, we are negating something indefinite. So then that means everything that this word applies to is negated. So if I said, there's no cat in my house, cat here is indefinite, and it came in a negating sentence. I'm negating an indefinite word. So anything that applies to this word, or anything to which this word would apply, is included in the negation, since it was indefinite, as opposed to me saying the cat is not in my house. Then you could say which one, because then the negation is not all inclusive. Unlike him, is there anything? So that anything is indefinite, and it's in a negating sentence. So anything that's called something, then yani, whatever might be called a thing, because that's what anything means, something, is included in the negation. فَيَشْمَلُ كُلَّ مَا سِوَاهُ, and so it includes everything other than him. مِنْ حَجْمٍ كَثِيفٍ وَحَجْمٍ لَطِيفٍ, whether it's a tangible volume or an intangible volume. فَقَوْلُ مُشَبِّهَةِ الْعَصْرِ إِنَّ مَعْنَى الْآيَةِ لَيْسَ لَهُ مِثْلٌ فِيمَا نَعْرِفُهُ زَيْغٌ مِنَ الْقَوْلِ. And so the saying of some of the God comparers of our time, the contemporary God comparers, that the meaning of the verse is that he doesn't have any similar that we're familiar with. Nothing like him. We're not familiar with anything like him, is the meaning. This is perversion. This is a perverted saying. لا يلتفت إليه, and it's not given any regard. قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him. Wala ma'dud, nor numbered, or nor at all numbered, or nor at all counted. And there might be other words that work there too. SharH, the explanation, أنه ليس ذا عدد, is that he is not someone numbered or someone of numbers. He is not someone of numbers. وكثرة, nor is he someone of multiplicity. يعني أن الله منزه عن الكمية المتصلة والمنفصلة. This means that Allah is cleared from amount. Yani, he is cleared from, so if I just translate literally, a connected amount. عن الكمية المتصلة, a connected amount. Yani, that means he is cleared from being a compound. Wal munfasila, and he's cleared from a disconnected amount. That means, it boils down to saying, he's cleared of having a type. He's not one of a kind. لأن الكمية المتصلة تقتضي التركيب كالمقادير. This is because connected amount, having a connected amount would dictate composition. So he would be a compound. كالمقادير, like measurements. والكمية المنفصلة تقتضي التعدد. And disconnected amount dictates multiplicity. كالأفراد المتعددة, like numerous individuals. وكلا ذلك مستحيل على الله, and all of that is impossible for God. ويعبر بعضهم بالكم المتصل والكم المنفصل. And some express this in Arabic with the words that I just said. And they basically translate like I already said. Connected amount and disconnected amount. ثم فسروا الكم المتصل بتعدد الذات. But they explained connected amount to be numerous, multiplicity of the self. تعدد الذات, multiplicity of the self. والكم المنفصل, and they explained this disconnected amount to be بوجود ذات يشبه ذاته. They explained it as the existence of a being that resembles his self. ولا متبعض ولا متجزئ, and he is not at all portioned nor fractured. الشرح أنه ليس ذا أبعاض ولا أجزاء. The explanation is that he is not someone who has dimensions nor parts. Wallahu a'lam. We should stop there.